Marcus Reed had seen plenty of strange things in his 3 years as a medical technician aboard the research vessel Aurora's Dream, but nothing quite like this. The escape pod they'd pulled from the debris field was sleek, organic-looking, and humming with an energy signature that made the ship's sensors go haywire. What was inside, however, made his breath catch in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost designed to be dangerous. Fox-like ears twitched at every sound, and 9 silver-tipped tails moved with restless energy, despite the containment field holding her to the medical table. Her fur was the color of starlight on midnight, and when those amber eyes fixed on him, Marcus felt like prey being sized up by a predator. "Well," he muttered, checking his scanner readings, "this is definitely not in the training manual." The being on his table looked very much like the old Earth legends of Kitsune, if Kitsune had evolved for interstellar warfare. Her body was humanoid, but distinctly alien, with retractable claws and fangs that looked capable of shearing through the ship's hull plating. Multiple lacerations covered her side, and his scans showed at least 2 cracked ribs. "Look at me," she growled when he approached, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. "Look one more time and I'll bite." Marcus paused, medical kit in hand. "Well, that's reassuring. Most of my patients don't start with death threats." He activated his scanner anyway. "I'm Marcus, by the way, and you're bleeding on my table, so we're going to have to work together here." Her ears flattened against her skull. "I am Nick Silvermoon of the Celestial Fleet, and I do not require assistance from—" She gestured at him with obvious disdain. "Whatever you are." "Human," Marcus supplied, beginning to clean her wounds despite her glare. "And right now, I'm the thing keeping you from bleeding out in the middle of space." He met her gaze steadily. "So maybe save the species superiority complex until after I've patched you up." Nix's tails lashed, but she remained still as he worked. "Your eyes," she said after a moment. "You stare too long." "Sorry, occupational hazard. I need to see what I'm doing." He applied antiseptic to a particularly deep cut, and she hissed. Among humans, extended eye contact usually means we're either fighting or ... He cleared his throat. "Well, let's go with fighting for now." "What is the other?" Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. "Nothing important. Cultural thing." He reached for the regeneration gel. "So, Celestial Fleet. That sounds official." "Are you?" "Military? I am a scout," Nick said, pride evident in her voice despite her current predicament. "I navigate the void between stars, map the unknown." Her expression darkened. "Until the pirates found my ship." "Pirates got you, huh?" Marcus applied the gel carefully, noting how she tensed at his touch. "That explains the fancy escape pod. Sorry about your ship. The moon hunter was ... She was beautiful." Nix's voice softened, built for speed and silence. "Like her crew should be." "Unlike her crew's current situation," Marcus observed, checking her rib alignment. "These are going to need time to heal properly. You'll be staying with us for a while." Nix's amber eyes flashed. "I do not stay anywhere. I am not a pet to be kept. Good thing I'm not in the pet-keeping business." Marcus sealed the last of her wounds and stepped back. "I'm in the keeping people alive business, and that means bed rest for at least a week." "I will not." "You will if you don't want those ribs to puncture something vital." Marcus crossed his arms. "Look, Nix of the Celestial Fleet, scout of the Void Navigator Extraordinaire, I get that this isn't ideal. But unless your species has some kind of miraculous healing factor I don't know about, you're stuck with us." She was quiet for a long moment, those unsettling eyes studying him. "You mock me. I'm trying to help you." Marcus softened his tone. "I know this has to be scary. Waking up on an alien ship, injured, not knowing if we're friend or foe. But I promise you, we're not the bad guys here. How do I know this? Marcus shrugged. Because if we were, I'd probably be dissecting you instead of bandaging you up. He paused. That was supposed to be reassuring. I'm not great at bedside manner. With non-humans. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Nix's features. Your healing touch lacks refinement. My healing touch gets the job done. Marcus began cleaning up his supplies. Speaking of which, you should get some rest. Your body needs time to repair itself. I do not rest easily among strangers. Fair enough. Marcus hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, you're safe here. Captain Blackwood runs a clean ship, and the crew, well, we're researchers, not warriors. Unless you count Jenkins in astrophysics, but his idea of combat is a strongly worded research paper. Nix tilted her head, and Marcus realized he was rambling. Anyway, he said, feeling awkward under that intense stare, try to get some sleep. I'll check on you in a few hours. Marcus, she called as he reached for the door controls. Yeah? Your eyes, she said quietly. Among my kind, to look so long, it is not done lightly. Marcus felt something electric pass between them. What does it mean? Nix's ears twitched, and her tails curled around her body like a shield. It means you are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Marcus admitted. Sleep well, Nix. As the door sealed behind him, Marcus leaned against the wall and tried to process what had just happened. He'd treated alien species before the galaxy was full of them, but none had affected him quite like this. There was something about Nix beyond her obvious beauty that drew him in. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, proud even in defeat. Maybe it was the intelligence in those amber eyes, or the careful way she chose her words. Or maybe he was just losing his mind. His communicator chimed. Read to Medbay, came Captain Blackwood's voice. Status report on our guest. She's stable, Marcus replied. Injuries are healing well. She need time to recover, but she should make a full recovery. Good to hear. Any intelligence on who she is or where she's from? Marcus thought about Nix's proud declaration of her name and title. She's military, or at least paramilitary. Calls herself a scout. Her ship was destroyed by pirates. Understood. Keep me informed of any changes. And Marcus? Sir? Be careful. We don't know enough about their species to understand their capabilities. Understood, sir. As Marcus made his way to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that Captain Blackwood's warning had come too late. He was already in dangerous territory, and the most dangerous part wasn't Nix's claws or Fang's dot. It was the way his heart had skipped when she'd said his name. Nix had never been comfortable with stillness. Her entire life had been built on movement racing between stars, dancing through asteroid fields, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. Now, trapped in this sterile human medical, Bay with her body slowly knitting itself back together, she felt like a caged mooncat. What made it worse was the human who kept visiting her. Marcus Reed was nothing like the humans in the intelligence reports she'd studied during her scout training. Those files had described a species that was aggressive, unpredictable, and prone to violence. They had warned of beings who conquered through force and showed little regard for other life forms. Marcus, however, hummed while he worked. You're staring again, Nix said as he approached with his daily collection of medical instruments. It had become their ritual over the past 3 days. He would enter. She would accuse him of staring, and he would make some jest about the necessity. A vision in medical procedures. I'm checking to see if that scowl has become permanently etched into your face, Marcus replied, settling into the chair beside her bed. Good news. I think there's still hope for your facial muscles. Despite herself, Nix felt her lips twitch. This was another problem. The human's strange sense of humor had begun to appeal to her. Among her people, wit was sharp and cutting, designed to establish dominance. Marcus's humor was different, self-deprecating, warm, inclusive rather than excluding. "You're healing." "Methods are crude," she observed, watching him prepare his scanner. "But effective," Marcus countered. "These crude methods have kept you alive and breathing for almost a week now." He glanced at her charts on his tablet. "Speaking of which, your cellular regeneration rate is fascinating. Much faster than human baseline. We are a hardy people," Nix said, then immediately wondered why she'd shared that information. Among vulpines, revealing species advantages to potential enemies was foolish. But Marcus didn't feel like an enemy. "Must come in handy for a scout," he said, beginning his examination. "All that exploring unknown space, never knowing what you'll run into." Nix tensed as his hands moved near her ribs. Not from pain. The injuries had healed remarkably well, but from the strange sensation his touch evoked. Vulpine culture had strict protocols about physical contact. Touch was reserved for family, mates, or combat. Yet Marcus's clinical touches felt different, gentle in a way that made her tails twitch with confusion. "Your people," she said, seeking distraction. "They do not mind you touching strangers?" Marcus paused, his hands stilling against her. Sighed. "It's part of medical care, different from casual touching." He resumed his examination. "Why? Is it taboo in your culture?" "Not taboo," Nix said carefully, "but significant." "Significant how?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks, grateful. That her fur hid most evidence of her embarrassment. "Touch conveys intent among my kind. The duration, the location, the pressure all have meaning." Marcus's hands had gone completely still now. "What meaning?" Nix met his eyes, seeing genuine curiosity there, rather than the predatory interest. She'd expected. "Depends on the touch," she said softly. "Some touches speak of challenge, others of comfort. Some ... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "Some?" Marcus prompted, his voice gentler than usual. "Some speak of deeper intentions." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither seemed willing to address directly. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat and resumed his work, but his touches had become even more careful, as if he were suddenly aware of their potential meaning. "For humans," he said after a moment, "medical touch is supposed to be neutral, professional. But," he hesitated, "but sometimes it's hard to remember that when the patient is ... double quotes." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Never mind, professional boundaries and all that." Nix studied his profile as he focused intently on his scanner readings. "When the patient is what, Marcus?" "When the patient is beautiful," he said quietly, not looking at her. The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Nix felt her heart rate increase, and from the way Marcus glanced at his scanner, she suspected he'd noticed. "That is inappropriate," she said, but without the anger the words should have carried. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "Completely inappropriate. Unprofessional. Probably against several regulations." He finally met her eyes. But true. Nix's tails curled and uncurled restlessly. Among her people, such a direct admission would be followed by either a challenge or a courtship ritual. But Marcus simply continued his work, as if he'd commented on the weather rather than declared his attraction to an alien being. "You are strange creatures," she murmured. "Because we find beauty in unexpected places?" "Because you admit it so." "Easily," Nix said. "My people are more careful with such declarations." "What would happen if someone from your species said what I just said?" Nix considered the question. "If the attraction was unwelcome, there would be challenge. Combat to establish dominance and discourage further advances." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And if it was welcome?" "Then," Nix felt her ears grow warm, "then there would be different rituals." ones that involve much circling and careful negotiation of boundaries. Sounds complicated. Less so than your human customs, Nix countered. I have observed your crew. They speak in riddles and half-truths, never saying what they mean directly. Marcus laughed. Fair point. We do tend to overcomplicate things. He finished his examination and began packing his equipment. So, hypothetically speaking, if a human were to find himself attracted to a Vulpine scout, what would be the appropriate protocol? Nix's pulse quickened. Hypothetically? Completely hypothetical, Marcus assured her, though his eyes suggested otherwise. The human would need to prove himself worthy, Nix said, playing along with the pretense. Strength, intelligence, the ability to provide for and protect a potential mate. And how does one prove such things to a Vulpine? Through challenges, Nix said. Tests of wit and will. Marcus grinned. I like tests. Do you? Nix felt a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. Then perhaps you should know that Vulpines do not mate lightly. We choose partners who can match us in all ways, mind, body, and spirit. Good thing I'm competitive, Marcus said, his tone light but his gaze intense. Nix found herself leaning forward slightly. You would challenge me? If you were willing to be challenged. The moment stretched between them, electric and full of possibilities. Then Marcus's communicator chimed, breaking the spell. Read to Medbay, came Captain Blackwood's voice. We need you on the bridge, Marcus sighed. Duty calls. He stood, but paused at the foot of her bed. NYX? Yes. For what it's worth, I think you're more than strong enough to handle whatever challenges come your way. After he left, Nix lay still, processing the interaction. By all rights, she should report this inappropriate behavior to whoever was in charge of this vessel. A human medical technician was attempting to court a Vulpine scout. It was unprecedented, potentially dangerous, and definitely against protocol. Instead, she found herself looking forward to his next visit. Her tails curled around her body as she considered the implications. She was a scout of the Celestial Fleet, trained from childhood to be independent, self-sufficient, and loyal only to her mission and her people. The idea of forming an attachment to an alien, especially a human, should have been absurd. But as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself wondering what other challenges Marcus might be willing to face for her. And more importantly, whether she was brave enough to find out. 3 days later, when Marcus arrived for his morning check, Nix was sitting up in bed, her amber eyes bright with determination. I have decided, she announced. Decided what? To accept your challenge, she said, lifting her chin proudly. But you should know that Vulpine courtship rituals are not for the faint of heart. Marcus's smile could have powered the ship's engines. Good thing I'm not faint of heart. We shall see, Nix said, but she was smiling too, fangs gleaming. In the medical bay's lights. We shall see indeed. Captain Joran Blackwood had commanded the research vessel Aurora's Dream for 8 years, and in that time he'd prided himself on maintaining order, protocol, and professional boundaries among his crew. So when his medical technician started what could only be described as an interspecies courtship with their Vulpine guest, Joran found himself in uncharted territory. Sir, there's an incoming transmission, Lieutenant Torres announced from the communication station. Vulpine origin, heavily encrypted. Joran straightened in his captain's chair. They'd been expecting this. Word had likely reached the Celestial Fleet about their missing scout. Put it through to my ready room. And Torres? Not a word about this to anyone. Understood, sir. As Joran entered his private quarters, he couldn't help but think about the complications brewing on his ship. Marcus and Nix had been practically inseparable for the past week, their medical consultations lasting longer each day. The crew had noticed, of course. It was impossible to miss the way the normally focused medic now hummed while working, or how the previously hostile alien had begun asking about human customs. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that made Joran's breath catch. The Vulpine on the screen was elegant in a way that seemed almost crafted for diplomacy. Her fur was deep auburn with silver markings that caught the light, and her 9 tails moved with controlled grace. Unlike Nyx's warrior bearing, this being radiated authority, tempered with intelligence. "I am Ambassador Vera Nightwhisper of the Celestial Fleet," she said, her voice carrying a melodic accent. "I understand you have recovered one of our people." "Captain Joran Blackwood," he replied, matching her formal tone. "We found Scout Nyx Silvermoon in a damaged escape pod. She was injured, but our medical team has provided treatment." Vera's ears twitched. A gesture Joran had learned indicated surprise or concern. "You treated her? Willingly?" "Of course. She was hurt and alone. What kind of people would we be if we didn't help?" Something shifted in Vera's expression, a softening that made her even more beautiful. "The reports about humans vary greatly," she admitted. "Some speak of your species as conquerors. Others describe you as unpredictable." "We're both, depending on the circumstances," Joran said honestly. "But in this case, Scout Silvermoon was in distress. We responded as any civilized beings would." Vera leaned forward slightly, her amber eyes studying him through the screen. "May I speak with her?" "I'll have her brought to." "That won't be necessary," came a familiar voice. Joran turned to see Nyx entering his ready room, Marcus close behind. Her, the scout moved with more confidence now, her injuries clearly healed. "Nyx!" Vera's formal composure cracked, revealing genuine affection. "When we found the wreckage of the Moon Hunter, we feared the worst." "I am well, old friend," Nyx replied, settling into a chair. "Thanks to the care I received here." Joran noticed how Marcus remained standing behind Nyx's chair, close enough to touch her shoulder if needed. The protective gesture wasn't lost on Ambassador Nightwhisper either. "I see," Vera said slowly. "And this is your medical provider?" "Marcus Reed." A medic introduced himself. "I've been treating Scout Silvermoon's injuries." "Just treating?" Vera's tone carried amusement now. Marcus and Nyx exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "The treatment has been comprehensive," Nyx said carefully. "Jore," and cleared his throat. "Ambassador, we should discuss the logistics of Scout Silvermoon's return to your fleet." "Actually," Vera said, "that's more complicated than it might appear. Nyx's ship was destroyed while she was investigating reports of human expansion in this sector. Her mission was to assess whether your species represents a threat to Vulpine territory." "And what's her assessment?" Joran asked, though he suspected he knew the answer from the way Nyx was looking at Marcus. "Humans," Nyx said slowly, "are not what we expected. They are complex. Some are indeed dangerous, as the reports suggested. But others double quotes." She glanced up at Marcus. "Others show compassion even to strangers." Vera's ears perked forward. "Interesting. The High Council will want a full report." "There's something else," Joran said. "We've been monitoring communications. Chatter. The pirates who attacked Scout Silvermoon aren't random raiders. They're organized, well-armed, and they're targeting both human and Vulpine vessels." "You're suggesting cooperation?" Vera asked. "I'm suggesting that we might have common enemies," Joran replied, "and that isolation serves no one's interests." Vera was quiet for a long moment, studying each of them. "Captain Blackwood, would you be willing to accompany me to a neutral station for formal discussions? The High Council has authorized me to explore ... Possibilities? What kind of possibilities? Cultural exchange, trade agreements, perhaps even a joint task force to deal with these pirates." Vera's tails moved in what Joran was beginning to recognize as amusement and guidelines for personal relationships between our species. Marcus nearly choked. Personal relationships? You think you're the first human to find a vulpine attractive? Vera asked with obvious amusement. Or that Nyx is the first of our kind to be intrigued by human behavior. Chemistry doesn't respect species boundaries, Marcus Reed. Joran found himself studying the ambassador more closely. There was something in her tone, a warmth that suggested personal experience with the topic. Ambassador, he said carefully, would you be willing to come aboard for these preliminary discussions? It might be easier to coordinate if we're working face to face. Vera's ears flickered. You would welcome a vulpine delegation aboard your vessel? We'd welcome the chance to prove that cooperation between our species is possible, Joran replied. Very well. I'll transfer to your ship within the hour. Vera's expression grew serious. But Captain Blackwood, you should know that what happens in the next few days could determine the relationship between our peoples for generations to come. After the transmission ended, Joran turned to Marcus and Nyx. I hope you too realize what you've started. We haven't started anything, Marcus protested. We're just falling in love with each other, Nyx finished quietly. The simple admission hung in the air. Marcus stared at her, then smiled softly. Yeah, that? Well, Joran said, try to keep the galaxy-changing romance under control until we figure out the politics, okay? An hour later, Joran stood in the docking bay, watching Ambassador Nightwhisper's sleek shuttle settle into place. When the airlock cycled and she stepped aboard his ship, he was struck again by her presence. She moved with fluid grace, her diplomatic bearing intact despite the informal setting. Ambassador, he greeted her, welcome aboard the Aurora's Dream. Thank you, Captain. She looked around the docking bay with curious eyes. Your ship is ... efficient. Not as elegant as vulpine designs, I'm sure. Different, Vera said diplomatically. But there's a certain honest functionality to it that's appealing. As Joran escorted her through the ship's corridors, he found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him. She asked intelligent questions about their research mission, their crew, their technology. Unlike the formal diplomatic exchanges he'd expected, the conversation felt natural, almost personal. Tell me about yourself, Captain, she said as they paused near an observation deck. What drives a human to explore the unknown? Joran considered. The question. Curiosity, mostly. The need to understand what's out there. And you? What makes a vulpine choose diplomacy over exploration or warfare? The belief that understanding prevents conflict, Vera replied. Though, I confess, I find myself increasingly curious about human perspectives. They were standing close now, both looking out at the stars through the viewport. Joran caught a hint of her scent something like cinnamon and starlight. Ambassador, he began, then stopped. Vera, can I ask you something? Of course. Earlier, when you mentioned that chemistry doesn't respect species boundaries, was that purely academic knowledge? Vera's ears twitched, and she turned to face him fully. Why do you ask, Captain? Because, Joran said, meeting her amber gaze, I'm finding myself very interested in non-academic knowledge. The silence stretched between them, electric with possibility. Then Vera smiled, revealing delicate fangs that somehow made her even more beautiful. Then perhaps, she said softly, we should conduct some ... field research. 3 days of negotiations followed. Officially, they were drafting preliminary agreements for cultural exchange and mutual defense against pirates. Unofficially, 2 couples were navigating the complexities of interspecies attraction under the watchful eyes of their respective governments. Marcus and Nyx had progressed to what could only be called courtship, complete with elaborate verbal, sparring matches that left them both breathless and the crew thoroughly entertained. Joran and Vera, meanwhile, discovered a shared love of strategic thinking, classical music, and long conversations that lasted well into the ship's night cycle. "This is insane," Joran said on the third evening, as he and Vera stood on the observation deck again. "I'm a starship captain. You're a diplomatic ambassador. We barely know each other. And we're different species," Vera added. "Don't forget that particular complication." "How could I?" Joran turned to face her. "You're beautiful in ways that shouldn't be possible. You're smarter than anyone I've ever met. And when you laugh, it sounds like music." Vera's tails curled with what he'd learned was pleased embarrassment. "You humans are very direct." "Is that bad?" "It's terrifying," she admitted, "and wonderful." Joran reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently touched her face, marveling at the softness of her fur. "Vera." "Yes, I know this is complicated. I know there will be challenges we can't even imagine yet. But I'd like to try." "Try what?" "Us," he said simply. "Whatever that means for a human and a vulpine." Vera leaned into his touch. "The High Council will be ... displeased. Probably. My superiors won't be thrilled either." Joran smiled. "Good thing we're both adults who can make our own decisions." "Very good thing," Vera whispered, rising up on her toes to bring her lips closer to his. Their first kiss was tentative, experimental, a question rather than a statement. The second kiss was an answer, yes to possibility, yes to connection, yes to whatever came next. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Vera rested her forehead against his. "Joran," she said softly, "what have we done?" "Started something beautiful," he replied. "Or maybe changed the galaxy. Possibly both." From across the observation deck came the sound of slow clapping. They turned to see Marcus and Nix watching them with identical grins. "About time," Marcus said. "The romantic tension was getting so thick we could have used it for hull plating." "Speak for yourself," Nix replied, but she was smiling. "Though, I admit, it's satisfying to see humans and vulpines can find common ground." "More than common ground," Vera said, not moving away from Joran's embrace. "Though we'll need to be careful. Both our governments will have concerns. Then we'll address them together," Joran said firmly. "All four of us. If we're going to change the relationship between our species, we might as well do it properly." Marcus laughed. "No pressure or anything." "Actually," Nix said thoughtfully, "pressure might be exactly what we need. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy." As they stood together on the observation deck, two couples from different worlds united by something as simple and complex as love, Joran couldn't help but think that maybe this was how real change happened. Not through grand gestures or political maneuvering, but through individuals brave enough to reach across the void and trust in connection. The stars outside looked different, now not like barriers between worlds, but like pathways to possibilities none of them had imagined. And for the first time since taking command of the Aurora's dream, Joran felt like they were truly exploring uncharted territory.